Imagine being in a store, shopping like any other day, only to be suddenly accused of something you didn't do, something completely outrageous. Now, picture this. You're an FBI agent, trained in handling high-stakes situations, but none of that prepares you for what's about to unfold. This is the story of one agent's nightmare encounter with a group of racist cops who falsely accuse her of shoplifting. What follows is a chilling tale of discrimination, false assumptions, and a shocking twist no one saw coming. The tension in the air was thick as she stood there, stunned, while the officers made their accusations. She knew it was all wrong, everything about it. But as the situation escalates, you can feel the weight of the unjust treatment building. The officers, who are too quick to judge based on the color of her skin, don't even realize the kind of person they're dealing with. As they prepare for a body search, something happens that leaves them frozen in disbelief. They turn pale, their confidence shattered. What could possibly make these officers go from aggressive to terrified? Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning of a shocking story that reveals much more than what meets the eye. To understand what happened that day, you need to know a bit about the agent at the center of it all. Her name was Special Agent Lisa Carter, and she wasn't your average shopper. She had spent years working undercover, handling some of the most dangerous criminals in the country. She was no stranger to tension or intimidation. But this was different. This wasn't a criminal she was facing. It was an entire system of bias and injustice. Lisa had stopped by the local convenience store on her way home, picking up a few items for dinner. She was in plain clothes, blending in with the crowd. But when she turned to pay for her groceries, something went wrong. Two uniformed officers, who had been watching her from a distance, suddenly appeared at her side. Without warning, they accused her of stealing, a charge that made absolutely no sense. She had a receipt, her ID, and every right to be there, but they insisted. As the officers grew more aggressive, it was clear their judgment was clouded by something far more sinister than a misunderstanding. They were determined to make her feel small, powerless. But Lisa wasn't about to let that happen. Despite the panic rising in her chest, she held her ground, demanding to know why she was being treated like a criminal. What happened next left everyone in the store shocked, and the officers questioning everything they thought they knew. As the officers pressed on with their accusations, Lisa's frustration boiled over. She wasn't used to being treated like this, especially not in a place she frequented, where she'd always felt safe. One of the officers, a young man named Officer Hayes, seemed to take particular pleasure in making her feel uncomfortable. His eyes glared at her with judgment, as if her very presence was a threat. The other officer, a woman named Officer Martin, appeared to be more hesitant, her posture stiff, but she followed Hayes' lead, barely questioning his actions. Lisa knew something wasn't right. She had worked in law enforcement long enough to recognize when something felt off, and this felt like a setup. She wondered if it was because of her race. She had heard stories, of course, stories of people who were accused of things they didn't do, simply because of how they looked. But never in her wildest dreams did she imagine it would happen to her. The store's other customers, some of whom had witnessed the exchange, now began to whisper. Lisa caught snippets of their conversation. Some were skeptical of the officer's claims, while others seemed to just want to avoid getting involved. No one spoke up for her, and the silence was deafening. In a final attempt to assert control of the situation, Lisa demanded a supervisor, certain that someone in charge would see reason. Officer Hayes smirked, clearly enjoying her struggle, while Officer Martin hesitated, her eyes darting nervously between Lisa and the growing crowd. As the minutes dragged on, Lisa's mind raced. What was really going on here? Was it just a misunderstanding, or was there something more at play? The officers' tension was palpable, and their next move could either escalate things further or reveal a truth none of them were ready to face. The tension in the air was suffocating. Lisa stood there, holding her ground, her heart racing but her face calm. She knew the stakes had just been raised. The longer this dragged on, the more likely it was that things could spiral out of control. She could feel the eyes of the store's customers boring into her, some curious, others too afraid to look. The officers were still standing there, the silent standoff between them growing thicker with every passing second. Lisa's mind was whirring. She wasn't just an FBI agent. She was a woman who had seen the worst of humanity. But nothing had prepared her for this, being wrongly accused in such a public and humiliating way. She had always believed that her badge would protect her, that the system would shield her from this kind of injustice. But now, standing in this small store, she felt utterly powerless. Officer Hayes was getting impatient. His hand hovered near his radio, fingers tapping against the side of his belt, as if itching for an excuse to escalate things further. His eyes locked onto hers, a smirk tugging at his lips, as if he could already see her breaking. Lisa's stomach twisted in frustration. She had to do something before this got worse. Officer Martin seemed to be the one struggling. Her eyes flicked nervously toward the entrance, as if searching for an escape, or maybe someone to intervene. But no one was coming to help. Lisa's jaw clenched. She had to take control of this situation before she lost her chance. "Call your supervisor now," she repeated, her voice steady but firm. "I'm not going anywhere until I talk to someone in charge." The silence stretched out, thick and heavy. It felt like an eternity. Lisa was acutely aware of every movement, every sound, the nervous shuffle of the other customers, the distant hum of the store's overhead lights. And then, just as Officer Hayes reached for his radio, something shifted. The door to the store opened. A figure stepped inside, someone Lisa hadn't expected to see at all, someone whose presence would change everything. The door creaked open, and for a split second, Lisa thought it was just another customer coming in. But then she saw who it was. Detective Alan Brooks. Lisa's jaw tightened, a wave of disbelief washing over her. Brooks wasn't just another officer. He was someone she knew well, someone she trusted, or at least she had. He was tall, with a no-nonsense demeanor that had always commanded respect. But as he stepped into the store, his eyes locked onto hers, and she could see the tension in his face. It wasn't the warm recognition she was hoping for. It was something more guarded, almost distant. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. What was he doing here? Had he been called to back up the officers? But it didn't make sense. Brooks knew her well. He knew she was an FBI agent, knew she couldn't possibly be involved in anything criminal. Yet, there he was, standing in the doorway, watching the scene unfold with an unreadable expression. Officer Hayes noticed him immediately, and without missing a beat, he straightened up, his posture shifting from the casual aggression of the moment to a more professional stance. "Detective," Hayes greeted him, his voice oddly respectful now. Brooks didn't respond right away. He just took a few steps forward, his eyes flicking between Lisa and the two officers. There was an unsettling pause before he spoke, his tone colder than Lisa had ever heard it. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his gaze not meeting Lisa's. Lisa could feel the weight of his words, the sudden shift in the air. He wasn't here to back her up, it seemed. His silence was louder than any explanation could be. She realized, with a sinking feeling in her stomach, that something bigger was at play. Was he involved in this too? Was he part of whatever was happening here? Hayes seized the opportunity. "We've got a situation," he said, his voice dripping with false calm. "This woman is trying to avoid a routine search. I'm afraid we're going to have to escalate this." Brooks nodded, but his eyes never left Lisa. The unsettling silence stretched between them. What was going on here? Why hadn't Brooks stood up for her, as he always had in the past? Lisa's instincts screamed at her to take control of the narrative, but the walls were closing in. She needed to know what was happening before everything slipped beyond her reach. And then, just as she was about to demand answers, Brooks' next words hit her like a punch to the gut. "We're detaining her, effective immediately," he said, his voice as cold as ice. Lisa's heart dropped. It wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It was a trap. The words hit Lisa like a hammer. "We're detaining her, effective immediately." Her blood ran cold, but a surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins. This wasn't just about a mistaken accusation anymore. It was about something much darker. She looked directly at Detective Brooks, trying to read him, trying to understand why he was going along with this. There was no trace of the man she once trusted, just a cold, calculated stranger standing before her. But before she could process the full weight of the situation, something unexpected happened. A voice rang out from the back of the store, sharp and commanding, slicing through the tension. Not so fast. Lisa's head whipped around. A man in a suit stepped forward, his presence instantly commanding attention. It was Agent Raymond Hall, a senior agent from her own team. She recognized him immediately, but the confusion on his face mirrored her own. What was he doing here? Agent Carter is under my jurisdiction, Hall continued, his eyes flicking between Brooks and the officers. You're not detaining anyone without cause, and you certainly aren't detaining one of my agents. For a moment, the room was silent. Brooks, Hayes, and Martin stood frozen, clearly thrown off by Hall's sudden arrival. Lisa, still processing what was happening, realized this was her chance. She wasn't alone. Hall's gaze shifted to Lisa, offering a brief nod of reassurance. You're okay, this ends now. But just as Lisa felt a small glimmer of relief, a new shock hit her. She caught a brief movement from the corner of her eye. A man in a hoodie had slipped into the store unnoticed, blending into the background. He was heading directly toward the officers, his face hidden by shadows. Lisa's instincts screamed at her that something wasn't right. Before anyone could react, the man pulled out a badge, flashing it quickly. FBI, Special Operations, he announced. His voice had an edge to it that sent chills down her spine. He turned to the officers, his eyes narrowing. I'm here to investigate an internal matter. You've been compromised. The room went deathly still as the implications of his words settled in. Brooks, Hayes, and Martin had been playing a dangerous game, one far bigger than a simple case of mistaken identity. Lisa's heart raced. The trap was far deeper than she had ever imagined. This wasn't just a racist encounter or a personal vendetta. It was part of a much larger conspiracy. The new agent walked up to her, offering a hand to help her stand. We'll explain everything, but first, we need to get you out of here. As they moved toward the exit, Lisa stole one last glance at the officers who had wrongfully accused her. Hayes was no longer smirking. His face was pale, and he looked as if he had just realized the walls were closing in on him. This was far from over, but at least for now, Lisa had escaped the trap.